My father, David, went rigid. We were standing by the luggage carousel at the airport. He'd frozen mid-reach for his suitcase, his hand hovering in the air. A man in a crisp charcoal suit was standing before him, presenting a thick manila envelope. My name, Amelia Ross, was typed neatly on the label. My brother, Leo, who was standing beside him, went ashen. He dropped his gaze to the scuffed tile floor as if he could will himself invisible. But this was happening. This was the fallout. This was the world they had built. And it all began 4 days ago. I was standing in my mother's dining room and they were all laughing. Leo looked directly at me, a wide, cruel smirk on his face. "You're not invited," he'd said. "You're not really family." My mother, Helen, hid her own smile behind a linen napkin. My father laughed, a loud barking sound that struck me with more force than Leo's words ever could. They all laughed while I calmly retrieved my coat and walked toward the door. I didn't raise my voice. I simply departed. Now, here at the airport, the laughter had died. The foundation they thought was so solid was cracking, and it was cracking along the very same fault lines they had carved into mine. Before we get into the story, do me a favor and like this video, subscribe to our channel, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. That Sunday was supposed to be a new beginning. It was my mother Helen's idea. She called it a family dinner, using the word family as if it were a magical incantation that could mend broken bones just by being spoken aloud. And I wanted to believe in that magic. I truly did. I spent the entire afternoon in my kitchen, meticulously preparing my shepherd's pie from scratch. It's the one meal my father, David, always claimed was his absolute favorite. I layered the savory lamb, the rich gravy, and the creamy mashed potatoes with the kind of precision usually reserved for assembling something fragile and important. I slathered a fresh baguette with garlic butter. I even splurged on a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon from the specialty wine shop, the kind of bottle I couldn't comfortably afford. I remember holding its weight in my hand, telling myself, this is an investment. This is for peace. But it was never about the food. It was a white flag. It was my way of stepping back into that house and proving I was still willing to try. It was my evidence that I still cared enough to make the effort, even after all the subtle slights, the forgotten birthdays, the phone calls that were never returned. I drove to their house, the same one I'd grown up in. The porch light cast a familiar, warm, yellow circle on the lawn. I could hear their laughter from the car, a loud, joyous sound spilling out into the night. Leo was probably holding court. A familiar knot of anxiety tightened in my gut. I took a steadying breath, hoisted the heavy casserole dish, and pressed the doorbell. The laughter cut off instantly. It was like a switch had been flipped. I heard footsteps, and my mother opened the door. Her smile was blindingly bright, but hollow, never reaching her eyes. It was her hostess smile, the one she reserved for nosy neighbors or my father's work colleagues she secretly despised. "Amelia, you came," she said, her voice an octave too high. "Hi, Mom, I brought the shepherd's pie," I said, lifting the heavy dish as proof. "Oh, how wonderful." She took a step back to let me in, but made no move to help me with my load. I walked past her and into the dining room. My father was at the head of the table, engrossed in his phone. He glanced up for a fraction of a second. "Amelia," he grunted, a curt nod before his eyes returned to the screen. My brother Leo was already seated, lounging back in his chair with a beer. He glanced at me, then at the pie, his expression a mask of pure annoyance, as if my very presence was an unwelcome interruption to his evening. "Where do you want this, Mom?" I asked. "Oh, just leave it on the counter, honey. We're almost set." I carried the hot, heavy dish into the kitchen and placed it on a trivet, then put the garlic bread into the oven to stay warm. I lingered for a moment, alone in the kitchen, listening as the conversation in the other room resumed, their voices softer now. When I returned to the dining room, the table was set, 4 places: Mom, Dad, Leo, and an empty seat. But the empty seat wasn't integrated into the group. It was at the far end of the table. isolated, as if it were an afterthought. I pulled out the chair and sat down. Dinner unfolded like a play for which I'd never received a script. Mom served a salad. Leo immediately launched into a monologue about his genius, his app development company that was perpetually on the verge of a massive breakthrough. He was bombastic and self-assured, his eyes fixed on our father the entire time. So I told the venture capitalist, "You either meet my valuation or I walk." And you know what, Dad? He caved. "Just like that," Leo bragged. My father chuckled, a proud, rumbling sound. "That's my boy, Leo. That's how it's done. You never let them see you sweat." "It's just brilliant, David, isn't it?" Mom added, passing the salad bowl directly to Dad, who then passed it to Leo. They bypassed me completely. I watched the bowl make its orbit around the table. I had to wait for Leo to set it down before I could reach across the empty space to serve myself. Nobody seemed to notice. I knew Leo's business wasn't brilliant. I knew because I had secretly saved it from imploding on 3 separate occasions. I had wired him money from my personal savings, money I earned working overtime, money he swore he'd repay but never did. The first time was to make payroll. The second was to pay a critical vendor. The third was for a can't-miss conference that somehow missed. I listened to him spin a tale of success built on my sacrifices, and I just quietly ate my salad. What was I supposed to do? If I said a word, I'd be the one causing a scene. I'd be the one ruining the family dinner. Again. I brought out the shepherd's pie. I served a generous portion to everyone. Dad took a large bite. "Still make a good pie, Amelia," he mumbled through a full mouth. It was the only direct comment he made to me for the rest of the night. Then the topic shifted. "So, the family trip," my mother announced, her voice artificially bright. "I was on the phone with your Aunt Carol. She's already looking at cabins up at the lake." "Ugh, that place," Leo laughed. "Remember that time I almost capsized the speedboat showing off for those girls?" "I remember," Dad said, a nostalgic smile spreading across his face. "Your mother nearly had a conniption, but you got it under control. You always do." They went on and on about the upcoming Ross family reunion. They debated dates. "Last 2 weeks of August are best for me," Dad declared. "No, David, that's when Leo has his tech summit," Mom corrected instantly. "We have to do it the first week of September. I already mentioned that to Carol." "September 1st it is then." "Booked," Leo said with a decisive nod. They discussed cabin rentals. They debated which cousins would be invited. They planned a whole itinerary. They talked around me, through me, and over me. It felt like I was a specter at my own family's table, a ghost who just happened to make a killer shepherd's pie. I sat there, my hand wrapped tightly around my wine glass. My heart was pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. They weren't just accidentally forgetting me. This was a deliberate act. They were methodically constructing a wall around themselves, and I was forced to watch from the inside. Every word was another brick. I waited. I waited for a pause, for one of them to turn and say, "Amelia, you'll be able to get that time off, right?" Or even just, "Amelia, you're coming, aren't you?" The pause never arrived. The conversation simply flowed onto the topic of Leo's new car. I had been holding my breath, waiting for an invitation to my own life, and I finally realized it was never going to come. They wouldn't offer it. I would have to ask for it. I would have to beg for a place that was supposed to be mine by birthright. My hands were surprisingly steady. I forced a small, polite smile onto my face. I looked directly at my mother. I kept my voice perfectly level. "Just let me know what the dates are for the reunion," I said. "I'll book my room early this year before the block fills up." The room went dead silent. It wasn't a comfortable silence. It was a loud, awful, screaming silence. My mother's fork made a scratching sound against her plate, the only noise in the void. Leo didn't look up from his meal. He just kept chewing, a small, smug smile playing on his lips. My father cleared his throat. He stared at the ceiling. He took a long sip of his water. Then he turned to Leo. "So, About that car, he said, his voice offensively cheerful. Are you leaning toward the silver one or the charcoal gray? He just changed the subject. He pretended I hadn't spoken a word, as if I wasn't there, as if I was nothing, and I just sat there staring at my plate. The shepherd's pie I had poured my afternoon into suddenly looked repulsive. The wine in my glass tasted like vinegar, and that's when it hit me. This whole dinner, this peace offering, it wasn't about peace. Peace that is contingent on your silence is not peace. It's not family. It's subjugation. And I had been subjugating myself my entire life. I had been making myself smaller and smaller, quieter and quieter, just for the privilege of being allowed in the room with them. And even then, I was still too much. I let the silence hang there for a moment. I watched my father and Leo dive into a discussion about cars, debating horsepower and trim packages. My mother chimed in, "Oh, the charcoal gray, Leo, it's so much more sophisticated." They were building a new, comfortable reality right over the gaping hole I had created. They were pretending my question had never been asked. I waited. I didn't fidget. I didn't look away. I just watched them. I watched them perform this breathtaking feat of erasure. They were confirming my deepest, most painful fear. It wasn't that they couldn't see me. They saw me perfectly well. They just didn't want me. And seeing me, then deliberately ignoring me, was the entire point. It was the source of their power. Finally, Leo seemed to tire of the silent treatment. It was too subtle for his taste. He wanted a kill shot. He stopped mid-sentence about turbochargers. He set his fork down. He leaned forward, propping his elbows on the table, and at last, he looked right at me. His eyes were like ice. And that smirk was back. He had been waiting for this. My question wasn't an interruption, it was his cue. "You're not invited," he said, his voice casual as if he were informing me of the weather. "You're not really family. Don't show up." There it was. The simple, direct, poison-tipped dart I had been dodging my whole life. This time, it struck me square in the chest. I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. I just felt all the air rush out of my lungs. It was a physical blow. And then, the worst part happened. The laughter. It began with Leo. He let out a single, sharp, "Ha!" as if he'd just delivered the wittiest line imaginable. Then my father, David, joined in. It wasn't a polite chuckle. It was a loud, genuine bark of pure amusement. He slapped his hand down on the dining table, making the silverware jump. "Good one, Leo," he roared. I glanced at my mother. She was pressing her napkin to her lips, her shoulders shaking. She was trying to conceal her laughter, but she was failing. Her eyes were shimmering with mirth. They were all laughing. They were laughing at me. At the very idea that I, Amelia, would dare to think I belonged with them at a family reunion. Even now, months later, it's the sound I remember more than the words. Leo's words were the weapon, but their laughter was the poison. It flooded my system, cold and immediate. It scorched away every last shred of hope I had carried into that house in my casserole dish. I set my wineglass down. My hand was perfectly steady. I folded my cloth napkin and placed it beside my half-eaten plate. Leo's laughter trailed off. He saw the look on my face. He saw the chilling stillness. He must have sensed that this time was different. I wasn't fighting back. I wasn't dissolving into tears. I was just finished. A flicker of panic crossed his eyes. Not guilt. Panic. The panic of someone who has pushed too far and is about to lose their favorite chew toy. "Oh, come on, Amy," he said, his tone shifting, trying to sound playful like a big brother teasing his little sister. "Can't you take a joke?" I looked at him. I held his gaze. "You meant every word," I said. My voice was soft. It wasn't a question. It was a fact. The table fell silent again. Leo's phony, jokey smile vanished. He didn't deny it. He just stared back, his expression hardening. He'd been called out and he didn't like it. My mother looked down at her plate. My father scowled, irritated that the fun was over. "Well," Dad said, his voice gruff, "no reason to be so dramatic, Amelia. Leo was just messing with you." "No," I said, my eyes still locked on Leo. "He wasn't." I stood up. The legs of my chair scraped softly against the hardwood floor. "Amelia, don't cause a scene," my mother said, her voice sharp with worry. Not worry for me, worry for the social harmony of her dinner party. I didn't look at her. I walked out of the dining room and into the hall. I took my coat from the closet and pulled it on. I could feel their collective gaze on my back. They were frozen, watching me. They had expected me to absorb the blow as I always had. They expected me to sit back down, swallow my pain, and ask Leo to please pass the bread. My complete lack of a fight was disorienting for them. My compliance was the glue that held their world together, and I had just let go. I walked to the front door and put my hand on the knob. "This wasn't a dinner," I said, speaking to the empty hallway, knowing they could hear every word. It was a message, and I received it. I opened the door. The cold night air felt clean, real. I stepped outside and pulled the door shut behind me. I didn't slam it. I closed it. Quietly. Firmly. I walked to my car, got in, and sat there for a minute, keys in hand. My entire body was trembling, but not from the cold. It was from the shock. Then, through the closed door of the house, I heard it. Laughter. It had started up again, muffled but unmistakable. First Leo, then my father. They were laughing at my parting words, laughing at my melodrama. I turned the key in the ignition. I backed out of their driveway, leaving my shepherd's pie and garlic bread to grow cold in their kitchen. I drove home, and for the first time, I didn't cry. That was the last night I ever tried to be one of them. The next morning, I woke to sharp lines of sunlight cutting through my blinds. My apartment was silent. I lay in bed for a long time, staring at the ceiling, feeling completely hollowed out. I checked my phone on the nightstand. The screen was dark. No new messages, no missed calls. No, "Amelia, I'm so sorry." No, "Leo went too far." No, "Are you okay?" Nothing. I got up and made coffee. The silence of my small kitchen felt different. For my whole life, any conflict with my family was followed by a terrible, anxious quiet. A silence where I waited, my stomach in knots, for them to forgive me for getting upset. I would pace. I would rehearse my apology. I would be the one to break and call to say, "I'm sorry I overreacted." I was always the one who fixed what they broke. But this time, I wasn't anxious. I wasn't waiting for them to call. I was just listening, and their silence was its own answer. It was a loud, clear confirmation of everything that had been said. It wasn't a joke. I wasn't family. They weren't sorry. They were relieved. The problem had finally removed itself. I went to work. I sat through meetings. I typed emails. I went to the gym. I came home. I made myself dinner. Still nothing. The second day was the same. Silence. The third day. Silence. By the fourth day, that hollow feeling was beginning to fade. It was being replaced by something else. Something cold and hard and clear. It was as if my vision had sharpened, the colors of the world more vivid. I had been living my life in a dense fog of hope and obligation, and it was finally burning away. I wasn't waiting for a call anymore. I knew one would never come. Then, on that fourth afternoon, my phone buzzed on my desk. I looked down at the screen. A text message. The sender. Leo. My heart didn't leap with hope or sink with dread. It just gave a single, hard thump. This, I thought, is it. This is the part where he needs something. I picked up the phone and opened the message. It read, "Weird. My loan payment bounced. Did you mess something up with your account?" I had to read it 3 times. Weird. He started with weird, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just detonated our entire relationship 4 days prior. "Did you mess something up with your account?" He was blaming me. He wasn't asking, "Did you finally cancel the automatic payment you've been making on my business loan for the last 2 years?" No, he was asking if I had made a mistake. The sheer entitlement was stunning. He genuinely believed, even after everything, that my role was to be the family's personal, automated teller. He assumed the money would just keep flowing no matter what he did. No, "Hi, Amy." No, "Are you okay?" No, "Listen, about Sunday." Just money. I stared at his words. My loan payment bounced. The loan in question was for one of his brilliant business ventures. A line of credit I had co-signed for him 2 years ago because his own credit was too poor to secure it. He had sworn it was just a formality, that he'd make every single payment. For 6 months he did. Then he forgot. So I started making the payments myself. I set up an automatic transfer from my savings to his account, $600 on the first of every month, for 18 months straight. I just paid it. Because it was easier than fighting. Because it protected my credit, which he had foolishly tied to his sinking ship. And because, deep down, I thought that's what family was supposed to do. After I left their house on Sunday, the first thing I did when I got home was sit down at my computer and cancel that automatic transfer. I looked at his text. I considered all the things I could say. I could unleash a torrent of rage, a long, furious paragraph detailing every single slight, every dollar I had ever given him. I could demand a groveling apology, but I knew it would be a complete waste of breath. He wouldn't hear it. He would just see dramatic Amelia making a scene again. He understood simple, direct language. He had taught me that himself. So I typed a very short reply. No account issue, just a family issue. No family, no funds. I hit send. I watched the little "delivered receipt" pop up beneath my message. Then I navigated to his contact information. I pressed the block button. I blocked his number. Then I went to my email and blocked his address there. I went to every social media platform and blocked him there too. I performed a clean surgical removal of him from my digital existence. I expected my hands to shake. I thought I might cry from rage or relief, but they didn't. I didn't. I just felt a profound, quiet click, like a deadbolt sliding firmly into place. For the first time in my life, I wasn't hurt. I wasn't angry. I was just clear. I had spent my entire life trying to earn a seat at their table. I had been paying for my own abuse. I was the family ATM, the family punching bag, and the family ghost, all rolled into one. And I had just resigned from all 3 positions. That night, after I blocked Leo, I couldn't sleep. The clarity I felt was too intense, like a spotlight had been switched on in a dark, cluttered room, and now I was forced to see everything. It wasn't enough to just feel used anymore. I needed to know the full extent. I got out of bed around 2 a.m. and went to the small filing cabinet in my closet. On the bottom shelf was a thick stack of old bank statements, still in their original paper envelopes. I'd never switched to paperless for my main savings account. Some part of me must have known I'd need the physical record one day. I pulled them all out. I grabbed a legal pad, a pen, and a bright yellow highlighter. I went to the kitchen, made a cup of tea, and spread the statements across my dining table. I started 3 years back. The first transfer to Leo was small, $300. The memo line just said, "For utilities." I remembered that call. He was frantic, saying his power was about to be shut off. He was so embarrassed, he'd said, and he would pay me back that Friday. He never did. I highlighted it. A bright yellow scar. I kept going, flipping through the months. A month later, $900. Memo. Car down payment. I remembered that one too. He said he couldn't get to his new job without it. I had just received my bonus. I sent the money. I highlighted it. Another yellow scar. I kept turning pages, moving through the years. The amounts grew larger, the reasons more vague. Vendor issue, $1,500. Payroll short, $2,500. Emergency, $1,200. Yellow scar, yellow scar, yellow scar. Each highlighted line was a small, sharp jab of memory. I remembered exactly where I was when I sent that money. When I sent him the $1,500 for his vendor, I had canceled my own appointment for a much-needed crown, telling myself I could put it off. When I sent the $2,500 for his payroll, I was eating instant noodles for dinner because my own budget was stretched to the breaking point. When I sent him the money for his car, I was taking the bus to work because my own tires were dangerously bald, and I was trying to squeeze another month out of them. I had been setting myself on fire to keep him warm, and he had been using my warmth to fuel the parties he laughed about at my expense. I found the loan, the one I had co-signed, and there were my automatic payments. $600, $600, $600, month after month, 18 months of payments. That alone was $10,800. I kept going, all the way back. I found transfers to my mother. Groceries, $400. Help with bill, $350. I even found transfers to my dad, $1,500 for what he'd called a small, short-term investment he wanted to make without Mom knowing. He'd pay me back with interest, he promised. He never mentioned it again. The yellow lines multiplied, covering the pages like glowing scars under the lamplight. I opened the calculator app on my phone. I started at the beginning. I typed in every number: $300, $900, $1,500, $2,500, $1,200, $10,800, $400, $350, $1,500, and all the smaller ones in between, $50 for gas, $100 for dinner. I pressed the equals button. I stared at the number on the screen, $25,800. I had given them over $25,000. I thought I was going to be sick, but I didn't. I just looked at that number, and I looked at the highlighted statements. This was my proof. This was the receipt for my love. I had paid for every laugh at my expense. I had paid for every dinner where I was ignored. I had paid for the privilege of being their ghost. I had funded the very business Leo bragged about while I sat at the table in silence. I had paid for the wood in the chairs they sat on while they laughed at me. Every transfer was an indictment. Every dollar was a link in the chain they had wrapped around me. I highlighted the final number on my legal pad. I drew a neat box around it. Then I whispered it into the empty room. $25,800. I leaned back in my chair. The tea in my mug had gone cold. This wasn't a family, this was a long con. I looked at the pile of paper, the paper trail of my own subjugation, and I whispered something else. That's over now. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a creditor, and they were all, every single one of them, in my debt. The text I sent to Leo was a declaration of war, and I knew it. My family, the Rosses, did not handle being told no. They didn't handle consequences. Their entire world was built on the foundation of me always absorbing the damage. I was the family's emotional and financial shock absorber, and I had just locked my suspension. I had blocked Leo, but I hadn't blocked my father, David, or my mother, Helen. Not yet. I was saving them. I wanted to hear what they had to say. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days after I cut Leo off, my father's name lit up my phone. I let it ring, and ring, and ring. Then it stopped. A minute later, it rang again. I let it go to voicemail. He did this 4 times in a row. He was not a man who tolerated being ignored. Then silence for the rest of the day. This was their playbook. Leo was the attack dog. My father was the authority figure. And my mother was the designated peacemaker, the one who would eventually call me, crying, asking why I was doing this to her. They were a well-oiled machine of manipulation. That evening, the real assault began. It was just after 7 p.m. I was in my kitchen, boiling water for pasta, feeling a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. The adrenaline from my newfound clarity was wearing off, leaving a heavy fatigue in its place. That's when I heard the car. a heavy engine, an SUV, my father's. It screeched into a spot in my apartment's parking lot. 2 doors slammed shut. My heart didn't pound with fear. It just sank with resignation. Here we go. I turned off the stove and walked into my small living room. I stood in the middle of the room and listened. Heavy, angry footsteps thudded up the stairs to my second-floor apartment. Then the pounding started. Not a polite knock. A series of hard, official, furious blows. Boom, boom, boom. Amelia! My father's voice, muffled but unmistakable. He was barking my name. I didn't move. I just stood there and waited. Boom, boom, boom. Amelia, open this door right now. We know you're in there. I walked silently to the door and peered through the peephole. It was them. My father, David, stood front and center, his face flushed and tight with rage. His shoulders were rigid inside his expensive coat. He looked like a man about to repossess a car. Behind him, pacing in the narrow hallway, was Leo. He looked awful, disheveled, unshaven, and utterly panicked. My father was just angry. Leo was scared. "Open the door, Amelia!" My father bellowed again, pounding so hard the frame rattled. "This is ridiculous!" I heard Leo hiss, his voice higher and more frantic. "Just open the door, Amy. We have to talk. You can't just do this." Do what? I thought. Stop paying your bills? I remained perfectly still, my eye pressed to the peephole, watching them. My father twisted the doorknob. It was locked. He jiggled it violently as if he could force it open with sheer anger. "I am not playing these games, Amelia," he shouted. "You are in serious trouble. You have jeopardized your brother's business. You have to fix this." And there it was, not, "You have to talk to us," not, "You have to explain." I had to fix this. My only function in their world was to be the fixer, the ATM. "Just tell her you're sorry, Leo," my father growled, turning on him. "I'm not apologizing. She's the one who... Just do it." Leo stepped up to the door, trying to make his voice sound placating. It was the fakest sound I had ever heard. "Amy, come on. I'm sorry, okay? I was just kidding at dinner. It was a joke. You know I didn't mean it. Now open the door. You're acting like a child." A non-apology wrapped in an insult. Classic Leo. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. This sent my father into another rage. The performance was over. He struck the door again with his whole fist. "Amelia Ross, open this door!" I heard a neighbor's door creak open down the hall. Someone was peeking out. "Dad, stop!" Leo said, his voice dropping to a panicked whisper. "People are looking." "I don't care," my father hissed, but he stopped pounding. He leaned in close to the door. "You have until tomorrow," he whispered, his voice low and menacing. "You turn that payment back on. You call your brother. You fix this. Or so help me, you are going to find out what it's like to have no family. You think you're so independent? You are nothing without us." The ultimate threat. The one they had dangled over my head my entire life. "We will abandon you." The irony was, they already had. Years ago. I was just the last one to figure it out. I watched as Leo pulled at my father's arm. "Let's just go. She's not opening up." My father glared at my door for one long, hard second, as if he wanted to kick it down. Then he spun around and stormed off. Leo scurried after him like a beaten dog. I listened to their heavy footsteps retreat down the stairs. I heard the SUV doors slam, the engine roar to life, and the tires squeal as they peeled out of the lot. Then, silence. A heavy, perfect silence. I walked back to my kitchen. My hands were shaking just a little. The ghost of old fear was still in my veins, but I wasn't panicking. I wasn't crying. I picked up the cup of tea I had made just before they arrived. It was still warm. I took a sip. Standing there in my quiet apartment, I understood something new. Silence is a mirror. My whole life, I had always filled the silence. When they were angry, I would talk, apologize, soothe. I would fill the quiet with my words, my money, my effort. I was terrified of their silence because it meant I was in trouble. But now I was the one who was silent, and they were forced to look at themselves in it. They had pounded on my door, and all they saw reflected back was their own ugly, desperate, entitled rage. Their power was gone. My silence showed them exactly who they were when they couldn't use me anymore, and they were nothing. After the night they pounded on my door, the silence felt different. It wasn't a tense, waiting silence. It was a settled, deep silence. I had made my move. They had made theirs. They had threatened me, and I was still standing. I went to my phone and saw the list of missed calls from my father. I blocked his number. Then I went to my mother's contact. I stared at it for a long time. She hadn't called. She hadn't texted. She was the family's designated peacemaker, but she only ever brokered a peace that served my father and my brother. She had never once stood up for me. She was a coward. I blocked her number too. Now my phone was truly quiet. For the first time in my adult life, I was digitally untethered from them. No one could text me demanding an emergency loan. No one could call me to berate me. I thought I would feel lonely. I felt free. 3 days passed. Life moved on. I went to work, came home, cooked the pasta I'd been about to make the night they came. Then the envelope arrived. I found it in my mailbox, wedged between a junk mail flyer and a utility bill. A plain, white, business-sized envelope. My name, Amelia, was scrawled on the front in my father's blocky, impatient handwriting. No last name, no return address. I held it. It felt thick. Too thick for a letter. A small, nervous lurch in my stomach. Was this it? An apology? Or a final, hateful letter officially disowning me? I took it inside and sat at my kitchen table. I tore it open. Inside was a wad of cash. All 20s. I pulled the bills out and counted them. $500. There was no note, no card, no explanation. Just $500. I stared at it, and then I laughed. It was a real laugh, but it was hollow and sad. $500. This was their next move. After the yelling, the pounding, and the threats had failed, they had resorted to bribery. But it was such a profoundly insulting bribe. I had given them over $25,000. I was paying a $600 a month loan for Leo, and they thought $500 in cash would fix it. This wasn't a repayment, it was a tip. It was hush money, it was a pat on the head. Here's some pocket money, little girl. Go buy yourself something pretty and turn the real money back on. It showed me in perfect, clear detail just how little they valued me. They thought I was a dog that could be bought off with a cheap treat. They thought my love, my pain, and my loyalty had a price tag, and that price was $500. I sat there for a long time, just looking at the wrinkled bills. I thought about all the things I could do with that money. It wasn't a small amount to me, it was my car payment. It was 2 weeks of groceries. It could finally replace the bald tires I still hadn't gotten around to. I picked up the stack of bills. I picked up the envelope they came in. I walked over to my kitchen trash can. I lifted the lid and dropped the money inside. It landed softly on a bed of coffee grounds and eggshells. I let the lid fall shut. The sound was softer than forgiveness, but it was so much cleaner. I felt nothing. No regret. That money wasn't mine. It was a trap. It was another link for a chain, and I was done with chains. That evening, as if on cue, my phone rang. A new number, one I didn't recognize. I knew who it was. I answered. Hello? A beat of silence, then my father's voice, tight and strained. He was at his office or using a friend's phone. He was trying to sound reasonable, which only made him sound more desperate. Amelia, he said quickly, did you get the envelope? Yes, I said. Good, good. He cleared his throat. Look, the loan payment didn't go through. I know you know that. But it's a mess, Amelia. A real mess. The late fees are piling up. The vendors are threatening to walk. Leo is in way over his head. This isn't a game. He was pleading, trying to cast me in the role of the responsible adult. He was trying to make me feel guilty. "It's not like we ever used you, Amelia," he said, repeating the line he had used before. He wasn't just trying to convince me, he was trying to convince himself. He was trying to rewrite history in real time. He was saying, what we did wasn't use. It was just family being family. I laughed. One single short, dry puff of air. His voice changed instantly, the desperation curdling back into anger. What's so funny? This is serious. This is your brother's livelihood we're talking about." "My livelihood?" I asked. "What about my livelihood? What about the money I earned? The vacations I never took? The things I went without so he could play at being a CEO?" "That's different," he snapped. "That's family. You help family. You're being selfish." "Selfish," I repeated. The word felt foreign. "Yes, I guess I am." "This is not a joke, Amelia. I am telling you, you need to fix this." "No," I said. A dead, shocked silence on the other end of the line. I had never said that word to him in my entire life. Not about anything that mattered. What did you just say?" "No, I'm not fixing it. I'm not sending any more money. I'm not calling Leo. I'm done. You said it yourself, Dad. I'm not part of the family." I could hear his breathing fast and shallow. He was losing control. "You said," I continued, my voice calm and low, "that it wasn't like you used me." "We didn't," he yelled. "That's the problem," I said softly. "You never thought you did. You truly, genuinely believe you did nothing wrong. You took and you took and you took and you laughed in my face and you thought it was your right. You thought that was my job. You ungrateful little—" he started. I hung up. I pressed the red end call button while he was mid-insult. I cut him off. I sat in my quiet kitchen. The money was in the trash. The final call was over. I was an orphan by choice, and I had never, ever felt so safe. The next week was the strangest of my life. I was free, but the story felt unfinished. I had blocked them, but they were still out there, clutching their version of events. In their story, I was the villain, the ungrateful, selfish daughter who had abandoned her family in their time of need. My mother would be telling this story to her friends. My father would be telling it to his. Leo would be telling it to anyone who would listen. I was the bad guy, and that just wasn't right. It wasn't about revenge. It was about the truth. I had the paper trail. I had the $25,000 proof. They needed to see it. Not so they would pay me back. I knew that money was gone forever. They needed to see it so they could never, ever again say they didn't know. That Friday, I went to an office supply store. I bought a 2-inch binder, a box of plastic page protectors, a red pen, and a label maker. I went home, brewed a pot of coffee, and began my project. I took all my bank statements and spread them out across my living room floor. Years of my life laid bare. This time, I didn't just highlight. I took the red pen. For every single transfer to Leo or my parents, I circled it. I wrote the date, the amount, and the flimsy reason they had given me. $900 car down payment. $1,500 vendor issue. $2,500 payroll. I printed out the loan agreement I had co-signed and highlighted my signature. Then I printed the statements showing all 18 of the $600 payments I had made on his behalf. I slid each page into its own clear plastic sleeve. I typed up a single cover sheet. It was a list, simple, clean, and devastating. Date, amount, recipient, stated reason. At the bottom, I wrote the grand total, $25,800. I put this summary sheet in the very first page protector. I printed a label for the binder's spine. I typed 2 words, 1,000 cuts. I chose that title carefully. That's what they had done to me. It was never one big, clean wound. It was 1,000 tiny paper cuts, every day for 20 years. No single one was enough to make me leave, but altogether, they had bled me dry. I placed all the pages, in chronological order, into the heavy binder. It felt substantial, a physical weight of proof. On the inside cover, I taped a single index card. On it, I wrote one sentence. This is who I was forced to be. Now ask yourselves who you have been. It wasn't an accusation. It was a mirror, just like my silence. I was done telling them who they were. I was just going to show them and let them live with it. The next morning, I took the binder to the post office. I packed it in a box and paid for certified mail so I would get a receipt when one of them signed for it. I did not include a return address. I watched the clerk slide the box onto the conveyor belt and felt a tangible weight lift from my shoulders. It was done. The truth was in the mail. I went home, expecting to feel a final perfect sense of peace. Instead, my phone rang. Unknown number, a local one I didn't recognize. I was tired of unknown numbers, but for some reason, I answered. Hello? Is this Amelia Ross? The voice was a woman's, professional, sharp, all business. Yes, this is she. Ms. Ross, my name is Ms. Evans. I'm an attorney with the Internal Fraud Division at your bank. My stomach didn't just drop, it evaporated. Fraud? My mind raced. Had I done something wrong by canceling the payment? Was I in trouble? The old good girl panic surged through me. I'm sorry, what is this regarding? Please don't be alarmed, she said, but her voice was inherently alarming. This is not about you. This is about an account tied to your name. We are conducting an investigation into your brother, Leo Ross. I collapsed onto my sofa. My brother? Yes. A different department has been investigating his business for several months for potential check kiting. During our audit, we pulled all associated accounts. We found a business line of credit for $15,000, which was opened 18 months ago. You are listed as the personal guarantor. My mind went blank. I had co-signed one loan, the one I had been paying off. We are aware of that loan, Ms. Ross, she continued. That one is, unfortunately, perfectly legal. This is a different loan, a separate loan for $15,000. I couldn't breathe. No, that's impossible. I never signed for that. That's what we suspected, Ms. Evans said, her voice grim. We pulled the original document. The signature on the guarantee page is supposed to be yours, but it does not match the signature we have on file from your bank accounts or your driver's license. It's a very good forgery, but it is a forgery. I was clutching the phone so tightly my knuckles were white. He had forged my name. He had committed a felony. He had stolen my identity to secure $15,000. And I never even knew. All this time, I had been furious about the $25,000 I had willingly given him. I never even knew about the $15,000 he had stolen. I waited for the wave of hysteria, for the tears, for the screaming rage. It didn't come. My stomach, which had evaporated, slowly reformed. It didn't drop. It settled. It steadied. It was the final piece of the puzzle. Of course he did. Of course he would. This wasn't a family drama about hurt feelings and reunions. This was a crime. He had been stealing from me in small, socially acceptable ways for years. Why wouldn't he graduate to a felony? I wasn't surprised. That was the most terrible and the most powerful realization of all. I was not surprised that my brother was a criminal. Ms. Ross, are you still there? Yes, I said, my voice low and steady. Yes, I'm here. What happens now? We've already reported it to the authorities, Ms. Evans said. The bank will be pursuing him directly for fraud. We just needed you to confirm that you did not, in fact, sign that document. Your confirmation is the final step. Don't worry, you will not be held liable for this loan. The bank is moving to recover its funds from him. Thank you, Ms. Evans, I said. One more thing, she added. Does he have access to your personal information, your social security number? He knows it, I said. It's my birthday, just with 2 digits flipped. He knows it. I would suggest you freeze your credit immediately. And Ms. Ross? Yes? You should hire a lawyer, a personal one. This is likely to get very, very messy. I hung up the phone. I sat in the utter quiet of my living room. The 1,000 Cuts binder was on its way to their house, a document that was already out of date. The line hadn't just been crossed. Leo had doused it in gasoline and set it on fire. I hired Ms. Evans for my own legal protection that same afternoon. I paid her a retainer with the last of my savings, the money I had been so carefully trying to rebuild. It was worth every single penny. She wasn't a family lawyer. She was a financial crimes lawyer. She was a shark. "They will not contact you again," she told me over the phone, her voice like steel. "I am sending a cease and desist letter to your parents' address, addressed to all 3 of them, David, Helen, and Leo. It will demand no further contact of any kind. No calls, texts, emails, or visits to your home or workplace. Any attempt to contact you will be considered harassment, and we will file for a restraining order." "And the bank?" I asked. "The bank is a separate matter, but this letter puts them on notice that you are my client and are fully cooperating with their fraud investigation. They will be quiet. They are in serious legal trouble." A week passed. The binder would have arrived. The cease and desist letter would have arrived. I could only imagine the explosion in that house. The binder, full of their betrayal, followed swiftly by a legal threat. I didn't have to imagine for long. My email was open on my computer when a new message popped up. It was from Leo. I had blocked his phone, but I'd forgotten about his other email addresses. My heart hammered against my ribs. The subject line was one word: "You." I clicked it open. The email was short, written not by a man who was sorry, but by an animal backed into a corner. "You think you're so much better than us? You send a lawyer after your own family? After everything we did for you? You ungrateful bitch. You are trying to ruin us. You are trying to ruin me. You are nothing without this family. You have no one. You are all alone. And you will regret this. I will make you regret this." It was a direct threat. A year ago, that email would have shattered me. I would have been terrified. I would have called him, sobbing, apologizing, begging to know what I could do to fix it. I read his final threat: "I will make you regret this." I didn't feel fear, I felt pity. He was so weak. This was all he had left, the empty words of a playground bully. He was trying to scare me back into my box. I didn't reply. I simply forwarded the email to Ms. Evans. I wrote one sentence above it: "For your files, this is the harassment you mentioned." Her reply came back in less than 5 minutes. It was 2 words: "Got it." 2 weeks went by. I froze my credit. I had the locks on my apartment changed. I informed my boss at work that I was dealing with a difficult family situation and that no one was to be allowed back to my desk under any circumstances. I was building a fortress. Then one Tuesday, I got a text from Ms. Evans. "It's done. They've been served." I had to call her. Served with what? I thought it was just the cease and desist. "It was," Ms. Evans said, but then he sent that email. That threat changed everything. It proved he had no intention of stopping. And the bank's fraud case is moving forward. They are suing him. And because your father's name is on the business as a co-owner, they are suing him too. They are being sued for the $15,000 fraud and for defaulting on several other business loans I didn't even know about. The bank is going after all of it. "Where were they served?" I asked. "At the airport, I believe," she said, sounding distracted as she rustled through a file. "The process server had been trying to find them for a week. He tracked their movements. Does it matter?" "No," I said. "No, it doesn't." But it did. I hung up. I knew exactly what had happened. Today was Tuesday. My Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, was flying in for her annual visit. They would have gone to the airport to pick her up, and I knew in that instant that I had to see it. I'd already bought my ticket, not for a flight, but for the airport parking garage. I had a feeling. I was there. I was sitting in a coffee shop overlooking the domestic arrivals baggage claim, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, sipping a bitter black coffee. and I watched the entire thing unfold. I saw them. My father, David, in his best blazer trying to look important. My brother, Leo, pacing by the carousel looking pale and sick. My mother wasn't with them. They were trying to put on a brave face for Aunt Carol. A man in a charcoal suit approached them. He was holding a thick manila envelope. He said something to my father. My father turned. The man held out the envelope. David, my father, went rigid. He just stopped, his hand hovering near his pocket. I saw the man say his name. David Ross? My father nodded slowly. The man handed him the envelope. Then he turned to my brother. Leo Ross? Leo looked up, his eyes wide with panic. The man handed him a second envelope. My father ripped his open, pulling out the papers. I was too far away to read them, but I didn't need to. I saw his face. He didn't flush with anger. He went white, a pale, sick, grayish white. His eyes scanned down the page, and I knew he was seeing the word fraud. I knew he was seeing the dollar amounts. I knew he was seeing my name, listed not as a defendant, but as a witness against them. My brother just stood there, clutching his envelope like it was a live bomb. He stared at the floor, pretending it wasn't real. My father looked up, his eyes filled with terror, scanning the crowd. He was looking for someone. He was looking for me. I held my breath. He couldn't see me. He looked back down at the papers. His entire body seemed to shrink. The big, powerful man who had pounded on my door, who had roared at me my entire life, looked like a small, old, terrified man. Their world, built on my silence and my money, was crumbling in public, at an airport baggage claim, surrounded by strangers. I stood up. I finished my coffee and tossed the cup in the trash. I walked out of the airport. I didn't look back. I didn't need to see Aunt Carol's face when she finally arrived. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is hot and angry. This was justice. It was cold. It was clean. And it was, at last, finished. The months that followed were not dramatic. There were no more confrontations. The lawsuit wasn't a fast-paced TV drama. It was a slow, grinding machine of paperwork and depositions. It was a slow-motion collapse that I observed from a great distance. I did my part. I gave my deposition to the bank's lawyers with Ms. Evans by my side in a sterile conference room. I told the truth. I brought a new copy of my 1,000 Cuts binder. I calmly walked them through the $25,000 I had given away. Then I told them about the $15,000 forgery. I was factual. I did not cry. I stated the facts and went home, letting the machine do its work. The fallout, when it finally settled, was quiet but absolute. Leo's business, which had always been a house of cards, folded completely. The bank seized its assets, which turned out to be next to nothing. The personal fraud lawsuit, however, stuck. He had to declare bankruptcy. I heard from a distant cousin that he had to sell his flashy car and move back in with my parents. My father's life was destroyed. As a co-owner on Leo's fraudulent business, his credit was annihilated. He was legally entangled in all of Leo's debt. The bank came for his assets. They had to sell the house I grew up in to pay the debts Leo had accrued. My father, the proud big man, was forced into an early and impoverished retirement at 61. My mother's world, the social status she prized above all else, simply evaporated. The story was everywhere in their small town. The Rosses, who thought they were so perfect, were broke. Their son was a criminal. They had lost their home. Aunt Carol, who had arrived at the airport to that spectacular scene, had told everyone. My mother's friends stopped calling. She was isolated, trapped in a small rented apartment with two angry, broken men. And me? I was fine. I got a promotion at work. I used the raise to move into a new apartment, a small, bright one-bedroom in a part of town they had never even heard of. I bought new furniture. I made new friends, people who knew nothing about my family. I opened a new savings account, one that I was slowly, $50 at a time, building back up. The $25,000 was gone forever. I accepted that. It was the price of my education. It was the cost of my freedom. And for that, it was a bargain. One night, almost a year after the airport, my phone rang. Unknown number. I had a new policy. I didn't answer unknown numbers, but something made me pick it up. Hello? A long silence, just quiet, shaky breathing. Then a whisper. Amelia? I froze. It was my mother. Her voice was thin and reedy. I hadn't heard it in a year. I didn't say anything. I just waited. I know I shouldn't be calling, she whispered. She was probably hiding in a bathroom using a prepaid phone. Your lawyer. But I had to. She started to cry. It wasn't her usual manipulative crying. It was the weak, hoarse sobbing of a completely defeated person. I'm sorry, she whispered, the words sounding rusty, as if she hadn't used them in decades. I'm sorry, Amelia, for all of it, for not protecting you. There it was. Not, I'm sorry for what we did. Not, I'm sorry for what your father and brother did. But I'm sorry for not protecting you. It was an admission. It was the first and only truly honest thing she had ever said to me. She was admitting that she had seen it all. The abuse, the bullying, the theft. She saw me being laughed at in her own dining room, and she had done nothing. She had chosen them. She had chosen the abusers over the victim. She had chosen her husband and her son over her daughter. I closed my eyes. I thought of the little girl I had been, the one who would run to her mother for comfort, only to be told, don't bother your father, or just let your brother have it, it's easier. I thought of the woman at that dinner table. I know, Mom, I said. My voice was gentle. I wasn't angry. I wasn't anything. I was just done. Can you ever forgive us? She started, her voice breaking. I thought about the word, forgiveness. It was such a big word. I can forgive you from here, I said quietly. She didn't understand. What does that mean? Will you come see us? No, I said, still gently. It means I forgive you. From here, from my new life. I don't have to come back to forgive you. I'm not coming back. But I forgive you. I was forgiving her for my sake, not hers, so I could finally let go of the last tiny ember of hope that she might one day become the mother I needed. Goodbye, Mom, I said. I hung up the phone, and I finally, truly felt free. Weeks later, I was scrolling through a cousin's social media and saw a photo. It was the Ross family reunion. They'd had it after all. The photo was taken at the lake. They were gathered around a picnic table. Leo was there, looking thin and resentful. My father was there, looking 20 years older. My mother was there, her arm around Leo, her smile brittle and fake, her eyes empty. They were all there. And right in the middle of the table, in the center of the shot, was an empty folding chair. Maybe they had set a place for someone, or maybe they had just forgotten to move it, but it was there. That empty space, that chair, said everything I never had to. It was the hole I had left behind. It showed that I was supposed to be there, and I was not. My absence was now a physical, powerful thing, more powerful than my presence with my shepherd's pie and my forced smile had ever been. I closed the laptop. It was raining outside my new apartment, tapping gently against the window. I went to my kitchen and made a cup of tea. I wrapped myself in a new, soft blanket I had bought for myself. I sat on my sofa and watched the rain streak down the glass. I felt peace. It wasn't a loud, happy peace. It wasn't a victory parade. It didn't need an audience or applause. It was just quiet. It was not the quiet of fear or the silence of surrender, of waiting for the next blow to fall. It was quiet because it was mine. End of story.